You're listening to another episode of Open Source CXO, the podcast designed to share insights on how to excel in your business using technology, regardless of the industry. Host Robert Kehoe is a self-taught software developer who has grown to the role of CEO. Renowned for his collaborations with organizations such as Stanford University, Nelnet, and Louis Vuitton, he continually seeks new challenges to conquer in the world of tech. Accompanying him is Don Blackburn, a veteran COO with over 25 years of experience in cultivating diverse relationships and driving innovation in various technical projects. Each week, they'll be sitting down with some of the nation's foremost technology leaders to develop an open source playbook, drawing from their firsthand experiences in the field. Let's talk some tech.
So I will say, just this next bit of topic, I don't know much about.
Okay.
I would actually, it's something that I've been meaning to explore a little bit further, but I just don't know a ton about. So maybe you just kind of start off by saying what SOC 2 compliance is and who it's for.
Yeah. It's very misunderstood frequently. And I'm going to do this because it's so hard not to. SOC 2, first of all, is not a certification. It's an attestation. So at some point, I'm going to say SOC 2 certified. You're never SOC 2 certified. You're SOC 2 compliant. And what it is, there's a group of auditors, I don't know the organization, CPA something, and they got together and said, we're going to create this standard list of controls, this service criteria list, and all the controls that apply to it. And there's 5 areas in the trust services criteria, and then there's all kinds of controls inside of it. And they say, if your organization is following these controls, then there's a good chance that you are doing, your due diligence to be a good and secure and good steward of your customers' data.
So is this all software based, or is it server, hardware,
yes,
network?
Everything. So it's really your entire security posture. Okay. So, they're thinking about data, but, it applies to your security as well. And what will happen is, and there's actually multiple levels of SOC 2 certification. Actually, I think there may be 3, but most people you got type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is that these auditors will come in and they will look at your controls and your policies and say, yeah, it looks like they have good controls and good policies, and at least at this moment in time, at this second, that's good. And we attest to that. The problem with SOC 1 is, it really is just that point in time. So I can make anything look good for half a second,
Yeah.
The SOC 2 Type 2 is an audit over a period of time. And that's what really everybody wants to see. And they will come in and they'll audit, and they'll go back months and months, sometimes an entire year, and say, they'll look at your controls over that year. And did you follow your controls? Did you follow your policies? They'll bring up an employee that was brought on. Okay, did you follow your onboarding policies? They'll bring up another employee and they'll say, show me their access and how you're able to prove what they did. I'd like to see your change control. What we found was we used some software to help us with this. And this is my 3rd time going through SOC 2. The first 2 times it was a spreadsheet and Googling policies. And
that must have been fun.
Yeah, the first time I was just tangentially involved. I was a director, but I wasn't I was on the security team, but that's my only experience with it. And it was painful. Mm-hmm. It was horribly painful. And there's so much documentation with SOC 2. There's these tools out there.
Who typically writes that documentation? Just
the
company?
Depends. It depends.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're lucky enough to have a GRC, like a security and compliance manager or a CISO or something like that, that would be their role.
Okay.
One thing about SOC 2 is everyone thinks it's just an IT thing as well, but it really is cross-functional.
Well, it covers the entire organization, it sounds like.
It does, and especially HR has a huge role in it. So, are you doing background checks? Are you onboarding people properly? Are you offboarding people properly? So you got to have everybody involved. When we do regular risk assessments, we bring the heads from all the different departments in, and we'll do that. Not everybody needs SOC 2.
I was gonna about.
I was going to say, why would you go through it, right? Are your clients asking if you're SOC 2 or?
So that's where you
Depends on
want
the
to do it.
data.
I mean, there's multiple reasons. One, if you've ever been in a situation where your clients ask you over and over again to fill out the same security questionnaire, they're curious about it. I will say that getting SOC 2 attested or compliant doesn't necessarily make those questionnaires go away completely. But I will say, in the sales process, when we're talking to new clients and the salespeople can go to them and say, hey, we've gone through at least the rigor of showing that, we have these controls in place, and we're best in practice kind of controls. It goes a long ways. They may still have their own questionnaire that they want us to fill out, but it definitely answers a lot of those questions. If you're a B2C organization and your customers are just an end user out there, typically they're not going to ask you to be SOC 2 certified.
Correct.
If over half of your customers are outside of the U.S., SOC 2 is a very popular U.S. North American attestation policy audit. It doesn't hold as much weight overseas.
Okay.
So ISO 27001 would be, if you do a lot of international business, you're going to be looking at that one.
Right.
There's a lot of overlap with SOC 2. If you add some GDPR compliance and a little extra privacy and things like that, then you've kind of fused between SOC 2, GDPR, and ISO 27001.
Okay. Now, SOC 2, so let's say we were building, an application for a client of ours. They were storing potentially sensitive information. That would be a decent candidate for SOC 2 then? Especially if they work with, I don't know, vendors insurance companies. I don't know if insurance companies require this, but like I know you can get errors and omissions insurance that cover data breaches and whatnot. Is that sort of thing, is SOC 2 sort of required for some of that, or like?
So there are 5 different trust services criteria, and one of them is confidentiality. So let me back up a little bit. When you're looking at doing your SOC certification, I called it certification.
Yeah.
I told you I was going to do that.
No, there isn't.
But when you're looking at getting SOC compliance, there are 5 trust services criteria, and you could just do one of them. You could say I'm SOC 2 compliant in this one area. You really need to look at all of them, and probably ought to do it with someone that really understands SOC 2, a lawyer or an auditor, and say, hey, this is what our business does. Do all 5 of them apply to us? Because most likely they don't. So that the one that you're talking about there would be confidentiality, right? Am I storing information that's of my customers that's critical and confidential, and I have the controls in place to do that? But let's say that you don't store any customer data, right? You probably don't need that trust services criteria in your SOC 2. And why spend the time going through all the different controls and making sure that those are all in place if you're not storing any customer data? Same thing with privacy. If I don't have any PII, or anything that I'm worried about being private, obviously I don't want my own stuff to go out there, but if I don't have PII, then maybe I don't care about the privacy trust services criteria. So you pick and choose your 5 levels, 5 services criteria that apply to you, and then you look at the controls that are applicable to those and the policies that are applicable to those.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's something I've never
Well,
looked into.
I'd imagine. So I think it was MGM Casino Vegas or whatever. They had a data breach.
That would make sense. Yeah.
I guess what happened there, from what I understand, is the person who did it or the group who did it took advantage of a help desk person.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd imagine, because this is organization based, that those policies and procedures that you're discussing would technically to be preventing that sort of. So is there training involved, like constant training? Is that part of the program where you have to have certain things set up to keep your people kind of updated on the latest, I don't know, scams and phishing attempts and this and that? Is that part of this?
Yeah, it's funny. I would imagine that those people that got hit were SOC 2 and 27001 and a dozen other being certified or attested or compliant doesn't mean that you are
completely invulnerable.
completely invulnerable. The first person that thinks that is, yeah, they're in trouble. Part of it is ongoing training. Now the controls are honestly looser than I like. You basically say do at least once a year. Your employees go through a security training, and you log it. You ensure that every employee goes through it. I used to do a 90-minute stand and deliver training once a year for every employee. And I can tell you, my inbox would get full the week before. Hey man, do I really need to come to that? I went last year and the year before.
Is it pretty much the same content every time?
It honestly is. I would update I would talk about most recent breaches. People, companies our company size that got hit, and hey, just because we're this size doesn't mean that we don't have a target on us, right? But since then, I've switched to using KnowBe4, and I like them quite a bit. Not only do they offer the security training, but they do simulated phishing. So they'll send out emails, and
you failed this. You clicked that link.
Basically, yeah. And you can choose what you want to do with them. You can, throw off confetti cannons in their queue if they did it. But
sounds kind of fun.
Really, it's usually like hey, this is why this is what you clicked on. This was the indication of why it was a bad email, and here's a video that you need to watch now. It's a 5-minute video on making sure that you can identify, bad emails. With security, you can spend millions of dollars on securing your perimeter and your infrastructure and things like that in one click from an employee,
Still get hit hard,
right?
Yep.
So it really is a lot about the employee and the ongoing training. That's one of the reasons why I like the KnowBe4 is they have a program. They're going to have to take me out to lunch after this, but they have a program that it's called the Inside Man, and they have a couple of these where it's like a TV series, and they've hired good actors, pretty good actors, and it's 7 to 12 minutes per episode, and there's a plot, and it's a running plot, but each episode focuses on a different area of security.
Oh, nice.
And over the course of the year, basically you've done your 1.5 hour stand and deliver security, but by doing it in monthly chunks at 7 to 8 minutes at a time, it's easier for people to say, "Oh, I got time for that," right? And people actually start to get invested in the characters. Right? At a company I was at a while back, by the time that we got to the end of season 1, we actually did a watch party when they released the last episode because we were kind of invested in it.
Did they
right?
wrap it up? Was there a cliffhanger at the end?
Yeah, actually there was. Well, they wrapped it up enough, but then there's season 2. I think they're on like season 4 of it now. But so what you can do is, in year 2 of your program, do the next season, so people aren't seeing the same shows over and over again.
That is.
It really is. Yeah, I love it. It's brilliant. And then add the phishing. Simulated phishing, and it's a pretty good program.
So SOC 2, now that I understand it quite a bit more, it's organizational based, it's people, it's all that.
But there's
not just software, not just server and IT.
Was this in place before you got to
Flight Schedule Pro? No, this is one I brought in, but
okay.
it was brought into another organization that I was at. I didn't bring it in. I loved it. Well, and that was the organization where I was doing 90-minute training, so I love the fact that I was off the hook for doing the stand and deliver training. But I liked it so much that I've brought it with me everywhere I've gone.
What made you decide to bring it into the organization? Then is there something that was required of you, or you just noticed that
doesn't seem like there'd be that
we're getting too big of an organization?
Well, so the first one, again, I didn't bring it in. Someone else did. It was a requirement for the training. So the training was required for SOC 2, right? Whether we did stand and deliver or this other style of training, right? It didn't matter. There are other videos that come along with it. It's not just security. So you can actually buy, their ethics videos, their harassment videos and things like that. So it's kind of a big picture tool. I like it quite a bit. Obviously, I'm a fond of it. They give a real nice dashboard for you to look at and see how everybody's doing. You can set up rules. New employees get these videos. People with elevated access get these videos. So it's a pretty nice program.
Gotcha. Okay.
I will say, we talked about, there's a lot of the people element to it, but there is a security or hardware side of things. So endpoint security is critical. Typical stuff. Do you have antivirus? Do your computers do automatic updates for your employees? Do they automatically shut down and require a password when you log back in? Things like that. With the right tools, and there's some out there. We're using Strata, but there's another one called Aptega, which is really good as well. They will put a connector in with like your Intune, your Microsoft Intune, and which will talk to all of your endpoints and then communicate with that, and it will report back to the tool and say, hey, all of your endpoints are compliant. So when you get an auditor come in, they'll open up your tool and say, it looks like all of your employees are compliant. Cool, check. And it's such a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
They also, policies. There's a lot of policies and a lot of policy writing.
Enforcing those seems like I would imagine that would be a big struggle. Just enforcing them and making sure people are, doing their deal.
It is. So that part of the enforcing is kind of nice. We talk about the monitoring and with Intune and with others. So we also have a agent in Azure and AWS. So it will actually go out and say, hey, looks like you put in this VM here and you forgot to put hard disk encryption. Okay. And it actually monitors your entire platform and will phone home back to the tool and say, hey, this isn't fixed. So when the auditors come in, they look at this and they have a pretty good indication of, yep, there was a problem. It's going to be a problem. Looks like they fixed it within a day or two. That's what I would expect. Good to go.
So does manual processes and procedures, is that covered under SOC 2 then? Even like you talked about onboarding, I was curious, enforcing something like that, making sure I could imagine a lot of that can be very manual.
Change management, onboarding, pen tests. There's a lot of things.
How do you keep track of those things then to be compliant?
In the tool, sometimes it's just like a snapshot. Okay. I upload the results of my pen test into that tool.
Gotcha.
And so the auditors come in, they get this one-stop shop where they can see the proof, and every time that you do it, they're going to come back and say, okay, well, looks like, you check this checkbox for all of your employees. Show me these 5 employees that termed, show me how you executed their offboarding and what steps you took, or show me your change management process. Who approved, these 5 releases? So there's definitely manual pieces to it, but these tools are pretty good about helping you track it, and whether or not, then it's, your job to go in and pull in all of that data and take a snapshot of it. And after doing it, the first year is brutal. I'll be honest, the first year is usually pretty brutal. After that, you kind of have the processes in place, and the trick there is just, hey, let's not go backwards. Let's make sure that we're maintaining these processes.
Are these independent auditors, or is there an organization that has a group of auditors that does all of them?
So there is an overarching organization that these auditors are part of.
Probably get certified.
Yeah, they are certified.
There you go. Now we got.
They're certified to attest you.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, so they are independent. It helps, like if you're using a certain tool like Strata or Aptega, you find someone that is familiar with that so that they know how to navigate around it. That's helpful. But yeah, there's quite a few out there.
And then they issue you some sort of a documentation say you are compliant.
Yeah.
In these different areas of SOC 2.
Yeah, and then when you have a new customer or someone that says, hey, I'd like to see your SOC 2 documents, you can say, here it is.
And then does that happen often? That you have clients come in that ask?
Yeah.
Are they universities?
The universities do, the bigger schools do. any deal,
Is it-
any government entity
That's
does.
what I was going to
yeah.
say. Is I always thought that was kind of a government thing. Like a lot of the government entities would be interested in SOC 2.
I would say that they are, but they are, and then some, right? So they definitely don't just stop with SOC 2. Then they've got their own set of questionnaires before they go any further. And SOC 2 would be, a lot of these controls are things that you would want to do before you went FedRAMP, which is kind of the big military or DoD or government. And that's, typically on their servers, on their version of GovCloud or whatever. But having these controls in place is a great stepping stone if you want to go that route. And if you want to say, hey, I'd like to get into the government contracting business, then, being SOC 2 would be a great first step.
Sure.
Gotcha. Okay.
Good to know.
No.
We haven't
Yeah.
we haven't made that leap, but that would be.
I mean, we've helped with various things, pen testing and various things like that, but that was probably ultimately for SOC 2 compliance.
Sure.
Yeah. I think, just having the policies in place is the big one. You get your policies, from your policies, you get your controls, and then you figure out where your gaps are, right?
Yeah.
And then you fill those gaps, and then you're ready to at least do your type 1.
Is this sort of obviously it's a huge time constraint. Is this sort of a very expensive initiative as well? No idea. Couldn't even guess what it costs.
It certainly can be. It obviously depends on the complexity of your organization.
Sure.
If you've got one server and 3 employees, it can go.
Right.
But I will
with
say
one server, 3 employees, would that even be?
Probably not.
Okay.
Yeah, but
So this is probably for companies
the
that are fairly
policies
well-established.
the policies that you have to write aren't really any different from 1 employee to a million employees, right?
Right.
You've got to have this set of policies that say that your acceptable use policy, your blah 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 policy. There's maybe 20 policies that you complete, and these tools are great because they'll give you templates at least, and you can download them all day long. Like if you want to do Excel and your own, more power to you.
Yeah.
Did that once, and it was awful.
Yeah.
But
That's not good at all.
but you certainly can. Having someone, we have someone now. We did my first year of doing this with Flight Schedule Pro. So that was one of my first jobs was to take that over the finish line. And our CTO had started it, and he said, "Here, take this over the finish line." And then we hired a security and compliance manager right at the very end when we were finishing our audit, and he helped take it, that first one over the finish line. But yeah, it was a lot of work.
I was going to ask, is that normally a CISO kind of a role?
Typically, a CISO would handle that.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Yeah.
That's awesome. No, that was very good.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. I really didn't know.
No, I didn't.
A whole lot about
I've been
SOC
meaning to
compliance.
dig into it more because we've had people asking, and I see it all the time.
We get asked about, what are your, how do you guys handle security and securing data and so forth, and we can obviously answer that, but having a certification wouldn't be a bad idea. Or I'm sorry,
Not a certification.
compliance.
Yeah. Being attested, it does help. Our salespeople really appreciate it.
Well, it's another thing to put on your website. It's another thing for them to pitch.
It just doesn't guarantee anything. It just guarantees that you're doing the right things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The likeliness is less.
Yeah.
That's I assume the goal there. So.
But they're basically saying, hey, yeah, we take security seriously.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, man, I really do appreciate your time. I
Hey.
do.